were people that were at the service 2 weeks ago, and they said they knew you, Jim.
Oh, yeah. Wait, is this which church is that?
Unity in the City?
Yes, yeah. I think I do know them. Yeah. Colin, you said. I think I misheard you at first.
Yeah.
Colin, exactly. Yeah, no, I remember him, yes. All right, great. So I'm going to assume that this is the group. And you see that Stuart is here with me in the room. And we have Sandy and Ellen, Jean. Sandy and Ellen and Naomi are at 100 Center Street. Judy Jacobs is at 100 Center Street. Arnold and Patrick and Jean and Susan, are you also at 1550?
Yes.
Yes, I am.
Okay. Wonderful, wonderful. So nice to have everybody, and we will get started. So I think what we'll do, usually when we have Soul Search, I bring a document that we read and discuss as we go. But today we're mixing it up a little bit, doing something different, which is that we had a movie that we watched, and we will now discuss that movie and some of the problems that the movie raises, and begin to sort of think about, well, now what do we do? Now that we know about this the situation with the plastics industry, the way that it made recycling, as they put it, I think in the movie, it made the recycling the topic of conversation, right, rather than any other aspect of responsible consumption. So I guess what we'll do is I'll let everyone who wishes to share some reflections. And so in this initial round, I would say hi Ann. In this initial round, I would say let's maybe not get into too much crosstalk. We'll just let everyone who would like to respond to the movie to do so, and try to take no more than a minute or two to share your reaction, and then after that we can get into more of a back and forth kind of conversation. But I want to make sure that we hear everyone's voice. Go ahead, Ellen.
Well, I thought that the movie was very interesting, and I thought it showed mixed messages because it showed that plastic was bad because of all the pollution and all the piling up near the sea. But then it said that plastic was a better idea than glass, because if you used a glass item from a grocery store and it dropped on the floor, the glass would break. But if it was a plastic bottle, the bottle wouldn't break, so it was safer. But because of all the piling up on the sea and the pollution, it was really bad.
Right. Thank you, Ellen. That's a great summary, actually, right? That it's easy, right, to say, along with plastics people, right, that plastic is this miracle substance, and it's also possible to say that it's this terrible, terrible thing. In actual fact, this is one of those really complicated situations where, in a sense, can't live with it, can't live without it. And so you're right, Ellen. Go ahead, Naomi, you're next.
I guess one of among the many questions that the film raises that Ellen has summarized so well is, are there ways of manufacturing plastic so that more of it becomes reusable? Alternatively, are there ways of harvesting plastic so that it does not wind up polluting the oceans and killing the various fish? And what is the responsibility of the manufacturers of plastics who have managed to shift the onus to the consumer? Should be the responsibility of the manufacturers in this case for either changing processes to make things more reusable or for better disposal of the end product.
Yes, I agree. And I think that and I also think that one of the biggest questions it raises is also how to change the topic of conversation away from recycling, right, to another topic. And of course, what topic that should be is also an interesting question. All right, who else would like to react? Go ahead, Mike.
Just following on your comment on changing the topic from recycling, I appreciated that they reminded us that it used to be the 3 R's: reduce, reuse, and recycle was the last choice. But I don't know if you all knew this before, but if you didn't, it's quite shocking to find out how it's the petroleum industries that kind of invented the whole recycling idea, and we bought it so we would think, oh, it's recyclable, it's okay. Whereas what we really start to see now is we have to shift that topic to like not buying plastic, reducing how much plastic we use. I don't know, Rabbi Jim, you said, you know, what can we do? We can't live without it, but we did live without it until like the 1960s. And I think it's one of the biggest mistakes people ever made in a way. I mean, there's good stuff it does, but we've so overused it. We have to think of new ways to package things and how not to buy, especially single-use plastics. So that's my takeaway, is we have to change our thinking to go back to the reduce and reuse part.
Great, Anne.
Well, one thing that occurred to me is about overpopulation, which nobody seems to talk about anymore. But the great deal of the plastics is that there are so many people. And another thought I had was with the recycling, that most people are confused about what to recycle and what not to recycle. And then I thought that somebody should get Jerry Seinfeld to make a sitcom about it so that people would be glued to it every week and watch it and learn about it, or to make a fabulous board game out of it. Those were my thoughts.
Thank you, Anne. Other voices? Yeah, go ahead, Barbara.
Sorry, I'm late. Somebody may have already said this. Obviously, what needs to be done is to somehow make the manufacturers of the plastic make it very clear exactly what is recyclable. And then, of course, the second thing is to try to get rid of at least some plastic. The problem with it is that I, for instance, would not want to be using glass storage things in my kitchen. I'm too prone to dropping things, and they're kind of heavy for older people like us. So that's a problem, and that's where plastics are so useful. So Mayim's probably right. It just all has to be made reusable, and reusable for a very long time. But getting the manufacturers to do this, of course, is going to be another thing altogether.
Thank you, Barbara.
Right, because what they want to do is sell more of it.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Arnold, you have a comment?
Well, I mean, I've worked with the petroleum industry, so the point about them pivoting to plastics is probably a legitimate point. As for recycling, I think there's an issue about kind of the trade-off between plastic, what it's actually made out of, how it's made, and whether you can recycle it. So I would suggest we end up coming down on the reuse side. Maybe rather than glass, we need something else, a third alternative for people where things are just not safe if you put them in glass. That's all I can think of.
Well, there is a lot happening with developing new packaging materials. So there are companies taking notice of that. and really moving on that. Just like within CCB, the way that the food services are looking at moving away from plastic containers to paper-based containers that can be composted or trashed.
Dean, you want to say something?
I think we use what's easily available, and the grocery stores buy all those clamshell produce products because that's what the producers are making easily and cheaply. And so it really seems like so much more a systemic problem than just a matter of consumer choice, because right now we don't have a lot of choices. So.
Yes, thank you. Go ahead, Patrick.
Yeah, in Brookline, I noticed at Star Market, they only hand out paper bags because that's like wasting trees, where you can use plastic. And other stores like at Cleveland Circle, when I go to CVS, they always give you a plastic bag, in paper, and then other locations they give you a paper bag, they give you a plastic. But here in Brooklyn, they're paperless. They're dealing away with plastic.
Yeah,
which is wrong. I think it's all wrong.
And there's a lot of even in Brookline where there's no plastic bags, supposedly there's a lot of loopholes. Susan, did you want to add your voice?
Did you just call on me?
Yes, I wanted to know if you'd like to share your reaction.
Yes, I had a very strong reaction. First of all, I was shocked at how much of this garbage is exported to third world countries like China and Indonesia. And it doesn't seem like a very viable solution. And the other thing I'm concerned about is when I go to the grocery store, I'm shocked at how many things are encased in plastic. It's very hard to buy something that isn't in some kind of plastic container. Like even if you buy loose fruits and vegetables, they have these plastic bags that you put them in. So you end up buying things that are all enclosed in plastic. So, it's very hard to avoid using plastic when you go shopping.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. Judy, would you like to share a reaction?
Well, I knew a lot of the damage that plastic does to animals and to fish and so forth. I knew how dangerous it was. But you have a choice between wasting the trees on paper and using plastic instead of using paper. It's a bad choice. The only thing to do is to recycle the plastic and use it over and over again instead of discarding it.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Stuart, do you want to add anything?
No, I know that it's been around for years now, the liter bottles of soda. When it first came out, the way they were engineered, they could withstand the carbonation, the strength of it.
Yes, no, plastic is really a remarkable material, and it's engineered quite the engineering is quite impressive. On the other hand, of course, it leaves us. That suggests to me, right, that there are ways of manufacturing it so that it would be more durable. But go ahead, Naomi.
There are also ways to make shatterproof glass, and I don't know the extent to which that is an alternative. I like the idea of reuse, but that brings up the same problem that we have with the deposit on soda bottles, which seems to keep a lot of elderly people supplementing their families' incomes by collecting volumes of these and turning them in, which keeps the retail grocers upset. But if we're thinking about the role of the oil industry, which is behind this, and we're thinking about getting away from fossil fuels, which is or has been up to now the big thing of the oil industry, of course they're going to start going into other kinds of what they call profit centers, plastic being the big apparent one. And I don't know how, in terms of global macroeconomics, this plays out, but I'm sure that there is a role for it somewhere.
Go ahead, Ann.
I was just wondering if there's some way that nobody's invented yet of grinding up all the old plastic and making it into something that you could use further.
Yeah, I mean, that is actually, how they recycle plastic, right? They wind it up. But I heard I think it was the same correspondent talking about these things. And one of the things that wasn't mentioned in this movie is that part of the problem with plastics recycling is the degradation of the material. So every time, that it's broken down into those little pellets in order to make new plastics, right? That plastic is of a lower grade than virgin plastic, and it's also more expensive to produce. So it really will take, it will require the companies essentially to agree to make less money. And I think that's, it's unlikely to happen in our late capitalist mode. We might have to wait for a new economic system to come along before that's going to happen. But I think it's very interesting to think about this issue of consumer choice, and it reminds me of a conversation that was on the NPR had a conversation about socialism, and I wonder if this was no, maybe this wasn't the topic, but anyway, it was about the use of Google, Facebook, and Amazon and other big platforms like this, which are monopolistic, right? And it's easy to say, oh well, just don't use Amazon, right, or don't use Google, right, as though it's simple to actually do that. It's almost impossible to have any kind of an online life without using some of these monopolistic sort of companies. So it can't happen only on the basis of consumer choice. But I'm actually, when I was listening to you, Susan, I was thinking, wow, when I don't buy, by and large, the clamshell lettuce. I tend to get stuff like that from Trader Joe's, and I realize that for the most part, they don't use a lot of those things with their lettuce. They use plastic bags as opposed to the plastic boxes. So I guess there is some way of choosing, but you're at the mercy of the store you go to. Not everyone can go to multiple stores. And the other thing that I was thinking is that, the reason that we take our produce in plastic bags is because it keeps it fresh, right? So I can buy these bagged salads at Trader Joe's. I can buy the salad on a Monday, and it stays fresh until the following Monday because of the plastic bags and probably nitrogen or whatever they injected the plastic bags. So there, so it has the effect of reducing food waste, which is again something that it's. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that there's a balancing act here that we need to address both personally and collectively about where is the use of plastics justified and where is it not justified. But I think the main thing is just not to live in this fantasy world, right, where something is deemed recyclable and thus it is okay to use. That seems like the biggest problem. But,
I agree with you, Rabbi. I think that's the word we need to get out, you know, continuing to encourage people to recycle just keeps the problem going, and people think they're handling it. So it's that change in consciousness we have to work towards, don't you think?
Yeah, and you enlightened, I mean, this movie enlightened me to something, right? Which is that those clamshells that you buy berries in, right? That those, you know, they have that recycling symbol on them, but they're not functionally recyclable. So they shouldn't go in the recycling bin. They should go in the trash. And I was actually noticing this the other day as I was walking down the street and noticing that that by and large, I put a lot more stuff in my recycling bin than I do in my trash bin. And I'm wondering, part of this whole fantasy.
Well,
Wondering if this is part of that whole fantasy that in Brookline, by and large, if you walk down a street in Brookline, people's recycling bins are physically larger than their trash bins. And that seems to be all part of the same sort of fantasy world. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Jean.
It sounds like there are only a few types of plastic that can be economically recycled. And I've heard them described as milk cartons and water bottles. And it makes me think that we're all recycling too much, that we fill the bins with all this stuff. It goes to the recycling place. The good stuff gets skimmed off and the rest of it, we don't really know what happens to that.
Right.
So I'm wondering if they should,
It's incinerated.
if we should talk to our recycling contractor and find out exactly what kinds of plastic products we really should be recycling, and then get rid of the rest. And then when we realize how much of plastic we're really putting in the trash, it may help us understand just exactly what this problem is.
Right, and it also strikes me, Jean, that if we weren't pretending that we were recycling it, right, then it would maybe go into the landfill as opposed to going to China or Indonesia. And it would actually be seen as what it actually is, which is trash. And we would have to manage it as trash and not pretend. Go ahead, Mayan and then Naomi.
Well, actually, it doesn't even go to China and Indonesia anymore. They stopped accepting it, so it's not going there. Trash in Brookline, everything that is not picked off, which is very little, is sent to an incinerator and burned. And the only things that are recycled are number 1 and 2s, which does include milk jugs, soda bottles, and water bottles. But anything else and anything that's black plastic, there's no way. None of those clamshells, even though they say number 1, they're not recycled. So we need to update the information on recycling, because here we are, we haven't been able to recycle for over a year, right? I'm talking about Brookline and the CCB community. We haven't been recycling for about a year. Now we're bringing it back on, but we don't really have the accurate information to tell people what to recycle. James Brown has been working on it, and he's got these signs he's putting up, which come from Recycle Smart Mass, that are supposed to be what the situation actually is, but it's no longer what the situation is. So I've asked him to check with the company Republic that does pick up our recycling. And, you know, I said, we're at the point where we can re-educate all the residents now, since we're starting over again. We got to get the right info and tell people what we can recycle and what we can't.
Right, and you know, CCB does not recycle with the town, so it likely is a different. It might be different for CCB than it is for residential, you know, for single family residential places. Naomi and then Barbara.
Yeah, a place as large as this cannot use the town disposal. We have to have a private contractor. But Okay, so we get a realistic handle on what can be recycled. It used to be 1, 2, and 5 were recyclable. Obviously, that has changed too because of less than accurate markings. So fine, now we ship it either to a landfill, and we have run out of landfill space in a lot of areas, or we ship it to an incinerator, which leads to a different problem, because when you're burning stuff in an incinerator, you get toxic smoke and you get ash. So now you have a problem of what you do with these. I mean, it's like the Russian dolls. You open up one and there's another one inside that, and another one inside that, and so on. But okay, in 100 Center, 112 and 1550, and I'm sure in the rest of the HSL buildings, there are really two populations. There are the residents who live here who pay rent, the permanent population. Then you've got a floating population, which is the aide who actually takes out the trash. And we send the message to the resident. We have no idea whether the resident transmits the message to the aide. So somehow we need to get, with whatever remedies we try, to both populations. And this would be easy if it's a population hired through HSL, but probably at least half the people who work here are hired privately. So whatever message there is, how do you get it to the people who actually will be doing?
Right. Yeah, go ahead, Patrick. Oh, no, I'm sorry, Barbara and then Patrick.
Well, Naomi answered a couple of my questions. The notion of burning plastic bothers me too. That sounds like a terrible thing to do. And then secondly, I don't think people actually realize what goes into the landfill unless they happen to see it. It's out of sight, out of mind. We put it down the trash chute and it's out of our minds, and we don't know what it looks like, how massive the problem is, all the rest of it. So, you know, both those things are extremely concerning.
Very much so. Yeah, go ahead.
You also have to watch your homemakers. I have a homemaker, every week I have to tell her, take the newspapers and put them in the blue box. Otherwise, you put them in with the trash. I have to keep on her all, every week I have to tell her, to remind her that you have to put it in the blue box and not to put them with the other garbage.
Yeah. All right, Patrick, did you want to say something? If not, mute yourself.
Myself, okay. What would really be helpful is, like, we did it with the laundry during this COVID-19. What would be nice, I mean, if we could have the recyclables left outside our door and they would pick it up and to be recycled, and let the management come and pick up the recycles like we did with the laundry, you know, when it's your turn to take the recycling things out. Have it outside your apartment for things to be recycled.
That's a whole other job for someone.
Yeah, that's,
They're not going to hire somebody to do that. No.
Right.
Because it worked for the laundry. It worked for the laundry.
They
during this
spent a
COVID.
lot of money on that, and that was very special during COVID.
Yeah.
They don't want to do that. And, you know, residents can do that much, take our recycling down. They're nice idea, but no way that's going to happen ever.
Yeah.
And then Jen. Naomi, did you raise your hand? I thought I saw. No. Okay, so go ahead.
Do I go next, Rabbi?
Yeah.
One thing that this film didn't mention at all, I don't believe, was the responsibility of government in this. It was really either the plastics industry or consumers. And I was interested in two things. One, the Biden infrastructure plan. And from what I can find, as it's now planned, there's nothing in the infrastructure plan to deal with improving the infrastructure for waste collection or recycling. So I wanted to find out what our local representative was doing in Congress, since he's a new guy there. And so I checked his website, and the only thing I could find was that he is a co-sponsor of a bill to amend the Solid Waste Disposal Act. And can I read it? Because this is pretty interesting. This is the introduction to the bill. To reduce the production and use of certain single-use plastic products and packaging, to improve the responsibility of producers in the design, collection, reuse, recycling, and disposal of their consumer products and packaging, to prevent pollution from consumer products and packaging from entering into animal and human food chains, and for other purposes. So it seems like this legislation is really looking at the systemic aspects of trash disposal in a way that we haven't really been addressing.
Yeah, I think that's right. And it's the only time that the legislature was mentioned in this movie was when the guy was describing how the plastics industry went to state legislatures to hire manufacturers, to put these symbols. I mean, to make that into a law, which was really interesting. The role of government seemed in this movie to facilitate the needs of the industry, rather than to actually be functionally protecting the environment.
What else is new?
Yeah, it's not a surprise, but it's still distressing to hear the guy, in Oregon, sort of who's in charge of recycling, say none of this stuff is recyclable, and in the greenest state, one of the greenest states in the country. But yeah, no, but thank you, Gene. That's very interesting and very important. One thing that I was thinking of is that there is a rule, and I don't know if you're aware of it, that any, I don't know if it's a national rule or a local state rule, but any retailer that gives you, filmy plastic bags is supposed to accept them back. And so, for instance, when I collect enough of them, as well as the stuff that comes in the mail from Amazon, and stuff that comes, in other forms of this sort of filmy plastic, I pile it all up and I bring it to Wegmans and I squish it into their bin. Now, what happens to it, I don't know, but I have a feeling, I have the sense that if every manufacturer were enjoined to accept back the packaging that they put their stuff in, that would quickly result in innovative ways of dealing with waste and minimizing packaging. But again, I don't hold my breath. Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
I see a big move towards taxing polluters, making them pay for it.
Yes.
And another thing is, the interest of certain companies to want to go much greener because they know they're going to win customers who care about that. So I think it's important for those of us who care to vote with the way we buy and, not always be looking for the greatest bargain, but look for, what does the least harm. And I feel like that shift in consciousness and thinking is starting to happen. And I just want to encourage that more and more because it's got to be the consumers who change, I think.
Well, I think you're right, and I also think that the man in the movie is right, that the amount of leverage that consumers has is minimal, as we've already discussed, right? If you go to Shaw's and you say I'm not going to buy anything in a clamshell, you're limiting to a pretty significant extent what you're going to buy. Go ahead, Naomi. And then I think I saw And also, so
Okay.
and then Ann.
If I go to Trader Joe's and I want to buy organic vegetables, I have to buy, for example, 3 peppers wrapped in a plastic bag or 3 zucchini wrapped in a plastic bag. If I only want to buy 1 pepper, which is loose, I cannot get an organic, and I cannot get an organic zucchini, and so on. So, what are my choices in this situation? I either
Your choices, right, are to,
or I increase my vulnerability to whatever the thing has been sprayed with.
or do you schlep, because you want 1 zucchini, you schlep down the road to Stop and Shop where you can get a single zucchini and not have to buy 3 of them, right?
Yeah, not necessarily as fresh as, unfortunately, the zucchini and pepper. Or I can schlep to the Whole Foods, which is on Washington and Corey.
Right.
But, again, this is a trip.
Right, it's a schlep, and how many stores can you go to, right? And how many, and the reality is, right, that if you buy the things in the plastic bag, they often last longer than if you buy the stuff that's not in the plastic bag. So it's, again, there's all of these complicated calculations we need to make. Go ahead, Ann.
I just was wondering how it would be if Trader Joe's just decided that they wouldn't sell anything that came in a clamshell, and they just were heroes in having a store that didn't deal with any of those things. Would that be marvelous?
It would be, I mean, I feel like every other store, including Whole Foods, which, sort of paints itself as this, very responsible corporate citizen, if you want to get a prepared salad at these places, very often they are in clamshells. But so are the ones at Trader Joe's. I happen to buy the ones that are in plastic bags because I prefer not to get the clamshells. But that's but again, it's it would be a remarkable move. People, I think, not only want to have an easy an easy meal, they also want to be able to eat their salad out of the plastic. Right, the container becomes what you eat your salad in. If you get one in the bag, you got to find another container. And so I do think that convenience dictates a lot of these decisions in a way that is unfortunate. Go ahead, Jean.
One of the things that Biden is saying about green legislation is that it's going to be an engine for new job creation and new businesses. And I think the companies that are making biodegradable food containers, for example, are seeing a big market open up to them.
Yeah.
And Livite, the natural salad and sandwich place down Beacon Street, makes its stuff available in biodegradable containers.
Yes.
So you're not only getting organic food, but you're getting a container that's not plastic.
Right. Oh my gosh, I can't remember the name of the place, but there was one briefly in Brookline Village. They use all biodegradable stuff too.
I think it's partly a matter of being mindful of what we're using. I was noticing that when we used to have the cafe here, we had plastic utensils, new plastic utensils every single week, and then everybody threw them out. But why can't we just bring our own fork and spoon or get biodegradable?
I was very excited. Right before the pandemic, I was very excited that we were gifted a big set of dishes and silverware, and I bought glasses for the Shabbat dinners at Dinesh, which meant that we were no longer going to be using disposables for those dinners. And it's a small dent in terms of the consumption, but it's symbolic, obviously, and it also is just much nicer to eat with real silverware off plates than to eat with plastic stuff. Go ahead, Naomi.
One question about the biodegradables. When they first came out, and this was again quite a few years ago. The problem was that they biodegraded if you left them in the sunlight for a year and a half. If you buried them in a landfill, they had a much, much longer life. Now, do we know that biodegradables have improved to the point where they will degrade in the landfill to which they are consigned? I don't know. I'm just raising it as an issue that did arise many years ago. I don't know whether it is still an issue. It makes me,
I think some of those can go to composting.
yeah.
Right, that seems to me to be, the Clover, that's the name of the place I was thinking, Clover. That everything they sell, everything they give you can go into the compost. So they don't have trash bins there.
Okay.
They have a compost bin. And I do think that it would be great to move to an economy that was like that. But again, I don't know if there is a cost. There's a cost associated with that, and it's pretty significant cost. Going to lunch at Clover, the food is better than at, say, Burger King, right? But having lunch there is going to set you back $20. It's not going to set you back 10 or whatever. And so there's that price pressure is real. Go ahead, Patrick.
Sometimes I'll go shopping, and whenever I volunteer at Eastern Service Workers in Dorchester, and I'll go to America's Food Basket, and they're the only supermarket that uses plastic.
Well, the Wegmans in Newton doesn't use plastic because Newton doesn't allow plastic bags, but the Wegmans in Natick, where I go when I'm schlepping my kid to his sports practice, does use plastic. So you have to actively remember to ask for paper bags, or usually I'm getting better now of bringing in my remarkably large collection of reusable shopping bags. But I'm not sure they're actually any better. But at least they make me feel virtuous because I'm not taking notes. Go ahead, Mike.
I think it really does go back to our intention, and it starts with us to then seed that amongst other people. So I understand the schlep and all that. I feel that, but there are other ways we can explore to get our groceries and what we need. So I just want to mention Imperfect Foods, and I'll put a little more about that in the chat if you want to find out about it. They've committed to making all their packaging recycling. So like you get a delivery and they'll pick up the inner stuff that's recyclable when they deliver your new delivery. So, we have to think about things like that. Check the chat. But somebody mentioned composting too, like if we have more paper-based containers, those are compostable. So we're working on getting composting back at CCB too. I don't know how long it's going to take to do it, but it's definitely on the agenda to try to get that back. So I hope we can. But the overall thing of intention and mindfulness somebody mentioned, I just want to tie it back into why is Rabbi Jim having this session on this anyway? And Rabbi Jim had a session last week about, what's the point of keeping kosher and all that? It's like mindful eating, to be careful and intentional about eating and buying. So thank you, Rabbi Jim, for doing this. I think that's the answer, is changing consciousness.
Right. I was talking to Rhonda Lyman today about this, and she had the same question. And I said, I consider sustainability to be a spiritual topic. Any topic that has to do with how we live our lives and how do we make our lived environment and our lived experience better. That's an aspect of spirituality, and mindfulness is, I think, is a very big part of any of the religious traditions. It's about really considering the questions about how you're living. And so so as a, from a policy perspective, I am very much with Gene and probably most of you here on this call, right, that the government has a role to play, right, in setting more effective policies, not just pushing this pie in the sky, recycled, everything can be recycled, when we know that that's not true. But, on that's one aspect of the conversation and of the struggle. The other aspect is, well, given that this is the reality we live, what are we going to do, right? And how are we going to live to make a better place? So, one thing that my kid is an environmentalist, so we started using SodaStream instead of buying single servings of seltzer water, and then that all kind of fell apart. Not because we don't use the SodaStream at home, we do, but now that he's working out all the time, we have to have seltzer. He only drinks seltzer water, so we have to have seltzer water bottles in the car. So you're constantly making adjustments, trying to figure out how are we going to live effectively and meaningfully with the limitations that our environment sets on us. And just to sort of say, maybe it's a little early to say this, but we are coming close to the end of the hour, so I'll make sure I say this before we close, which is that I am planning to have at least a CCP wide. I would like to make it into a Hebrew Senior Life wide conversation about sustainability every month. And so the fourth Monday of every month will be Soul Search Sustainability Edition. And so I would love everyone's participation in determining the topics for these conversations. And I'm happy to do it in my sort of traditional soul search way, which is to bring a document and not make it sort of, shall we say, not make people responsible for doing their homework. Or I'm also very happy to do movies like we did, because there's, I think, probably lots of environmental themed movies that I think would be worth our attention. So please, if you have ideas for topics, whether just sort of an idea like, oh, we should talk about, the rainforest or something like this, or a specific text to look at, I'm very happy to consider those.
Great. Thank you, Rabbi Jim.
Thank you, Rabbi Jim.
Yeah, very happy. I'm also part of this HSL Sustainability Committee along with Maya and Jean. And we do occasionally have the ear of the Muppety Bucks in the organization. So we try to take advantage of that in whatever way we can.
Great. Thank you.
Great.
All right.
Thank you.
So final thoughts about plastic wars and how will change our behavior based on this book. I guess I'm really going to try not to buy berries in those clamshells, but I don't think I don't know if they have an option not to. So, go ahead, Naomi.
Well, a few people that I know have their relatives doing their shopping for them.
Just a minute.
And even if their relatives are not doing the shopping for them, they still have relatives. And is there just a way that people can start by quietly spreading this kind of thought process among their friends and relatives?
Mm-hmm. Right.
I think that would be really helpful. And writing about it when you have an option to write something, probably also not a bad idea. So, but I love the idea of spreading the word, and I do think, Mine and Jean, that Jamie has been or will be in contact with the public, and then we can we can be even more mindful of letting people know what is recyclable and what's not. So keep moving from there. All right, well, thank you everyone very, very much.
Thank
We will
you.
be shifting over to the sing-along in just a minute. So if you'd like to,
Bye.
bye-bye.
Thanks, Paul. I'm so glad we could talk about this. And if
Yes.
anybody wants to get more involved in that sustainability thing, it's Jean over at 1550 or me over at 112 and 100. So get in touch. I know it's come out in letters and stuff, and I put my email in the chat too.
Great. Thanks. All right. Thanks, everybody. Be well.
Thank you. Ed.
And we will continue now with the